Dust settled on the polished Italian marble floor like an insult. Liam shifted his weight, his steel-toed work boots squeaking against the pristine stone, while his 4-year-old son Toby dragged a sticky plastic dinosaur across the base of a glass display table. Salesmen in $1,000 suits hovered like vultures' eyes darting from Liam's faded flannel to the exit. They saw a mechanic who couldn't afford the air conditioning in this dealership. They were about to make a very public, very stupid mistake. Fluorescent lights hummed with a synthetic surgical sterility. Liam stood near the center of the showroom, the air conditioning blasting cold against the back of his sweat-dampened neck. The place smelled of leather conditioner ozone and the kind of aggressive, spicy cologne that insecure men buy at duty-free shops. Toby tugged at Liam's grease-stained jeans. "Dad, look, red one." Liam glanced down, offering a tired, lopsided smile. His joints ached. They always ached lately. 3 double shifts at the fabrication shop, followed by interrupted sleep, and mornings filled with burnt toast and negotiations over cartoon time. But Toby loved cars. Not the toy ones, the real ones. The louder and lower, the better. And Liam had promised him they'd look at the new Ferrari SF9. Oh, that had just arrived at Continental Exotics. "I see it, bud." Liam murmured, his voice a low rumble. He reached down his calloused thumb, gently wiping a smudge of dried apple juice from the corner of Toby's mouth. Footsteps approached. Not the casual stroll of a browser, but the sharp, deliberate heel-toe click of a predator zeroing in on an easy mark. "Can I help you find the exit?" Liam didn't turn immediately. He let out a slow, controlled breath, the kind he used when setting a delicate weld. When he finally looked up, he found a salesman standing too close. Name tag Blake. He wore a slim-cut navy suit that looked tight in the shoulders and loose in the chest, his hair slicked back into an architectural marvel of gel. Blake was looking at Liam's boots, then his hands where motor oil was permanently tattooed into the microscopic ridges of his knuckles. "Just looking," Liam said. His voice was flat, neutral. "Right?" Blake said, a tight, bloodless smile stretching across his face. "This isn't really a looking kind of establishment. We don't charge admission, but this is a functioning business, not a weekend petting zoo for—" Blake paused, letting his gaze drop to Toby, who was now quietly tapping the plastic tail of his T-Rex against the polished chrome stanchion guarding the Ferrari. "For kids to smear their hands all over $1,000,000 inventory." Liam felt the familiar hot spike of adrenaline in his chest. A younger version of him would have closed the distance between them, would have let the anger take the wheel. But he was 34, a single father, and entirely too exhausted for a felony assault charge. "He's not touching the car," Liam pointed out quietly. "He's behind the rope. We'll be out of your hair in 5 minutes." "You'll be out of my hair right now," Blake countered, dropping the customer service facade. The slick veneer peeled away, revealing the petty tyrant underneath. "Look around, buddy. You're tracking dust onto a floor that costs more than your yearly salary. My clients expect a certain atmosphere. You're ruining it." Liam looked around. The showroom was vast and largely empty, save for a few elderly men in pastel golf shirts sipping sparkling water near the finance desks. "Atmosphere," Liam repeated. He tasted metal in the back of his mouth. He looked down at Toby. The boy had stopped playing. He was looking up, his large brown eyes darting between his father and the salesman. Toby didn't understand the words, but kids were emotional barometers. He felt the sudden drop in pressure. He grabbed Liam's pant leg, hiding halfway behind his knee. Liam's chest tightened. He hated that look. It was the same look Toby got when the other kids at daycare talked about their moms. It was a look of quiet, uncomprehending apology. "Please don't do this in front of my kid," Liam said, lowering his voice to a gravelly whisper. It wasn't a plea, it was a warning. Blake scoffed, leaning in. He smelled like peppermint breath spray and stale espresso. "Don't bring your kid to places you don't belong then. Doors behind you." The silence in the immediate vicinity grew heavy. The faint chatter from the finance desks had stopped. Eyes were turning. Liam stood his ground for 3 agonizing seconds. He mapped out the geometry of a punch. Just one. A short, sharp jab to the bridge of Blake's nose. It would feel glorious. The crunch of cartilage, the sudden blooming of red on that pristine navy lapel. But then Toby's small, warm hand slipped into his. Liam looked down. Toby's fingers were sticky-coated in the invisible residue of a morning spent eating graham crackers. The anger in Liam's chest fractured, dissolving into a bone-deep weariness. There was no victory here. If he fought, he proved them right. He became the trash they assumed he was, and worse, Toby would have to watch it happen. "Come on, T," Liam said gently, squeezing the small hand. "Let's go look at something else." "But the red one—" Toby whispered, his voice trembling slightly. "I know, buddy. We'll find a better one." Liam turned his back on Blake. It took every ounce of self-control he possessed not to look over his shoulder, not to issue a parting shot. He just walked, his boots echoing heavily against the marble each step, a rhythmic reminder of his own perceived inadequacy. "Yeah, have a safe drive back to whatever trailer park you crawled out of," Blake muttered just loud enough to carry. Liam stopped. His grip on Toby's hand tightened just a fraction. He closed his eyes, inhaling the sterile, chilled air of the showroom one last time. He didn't turn around. He pushed through the heavy glass double doors and stepped out into the blinding, oppressive heat of the afternoon sun. The heat hit them like a wet blanket smelling of hot asphalt and exhaust fumes. Real life. "Dad, are you mad at me?" Toby asked, squinting up into the sunlight. Liam crouched down on the concrete sidewalk, ignoring the way it burned through the knees of his jeans. He brought himself eye level with his son, framing Toby's small face with his rough hands. "No, Toby. I'm never mad at you," Liam said fiercely, his voice cracking just a fraction. "Never. That guy in there. He forgot how to be a person. He only sees things with price tags. We don't care about people like that." "Okay." Toby sniffled, nodding slowly. "Okay." Liam stood up, hoisting Toby onto his shoulders. The boy giggled, the tension evaporating as quickly as it had arrived. Liam carried him across the sprawling, sun-baked parking lot. They bypassed the gleaming rows of customer cars, the ubiquitous black Range Rovers, the silver Porsche Mayans, the leasing special Mercedes sedans. They walked toward the very back of the lot where the asphalt was cracked and weeds pushed through the fissures, where Liam had parked to avoid getting dinged by people who didn't know how to open a door. He didn't drive a truck. He didn't drive a rusty sedan. Sitting in the far corner, baking in the sun, was a low, wide silhouette covered in a drab, dust-stained canvas tarp. Liam set Toby down next to the front left wheel. He unhooked the bungee cord, securing the fabric. He gripped the heavy canvas and pulled it back, the coarse material scraping loudly as it revealed the metal beneath. Underneath the tarp was a 1957 Mercedes-Benz 300 SL Gullwing. But it wasn't a pristine, museum-quality trailer queen. It was stripped entirely down to its raw, unpainted aluminum alloy body. Scratches, hammer marks, and the naked silver skin of the metal gleamed violently in the afternoon sun. It was a ghost car, a chassis that collectors whispered about in hushed, reverent tones at Pebble Beach. It didn't look polished. It looked like a weapon of war. Liam pulled a heavy brass key from his pocket, the metal warm against his skin. He unlocked the driver's side and lifted the iconic roof-hinged door. It didn't pop open on pneumatic struts. It rose with a heavy mechanical clack, a sound of pure, unadulterated engineering. Vivian rubbed her temples. Her office was suspended over the showroom floor like a glass birdcage, soundproofed and air-conditioned to a crisp 66 degrees. She smelled of bitter espresso and the expensive heavy cardstock of the quarterly reports spread across her mahogany desk. She was 38, unmarried by choice, and bone-tired of the empire she had built. She hated the people who bought her cars. She hated the crypto bros who wanted neon green wraps on McLarens, and she hated the hedge fund managers who bought classic Ferraris just to lock them in climate-controlled vaults as appreciating assets. Cars were meant to bleed oil, meant to smell like unburnt hydrocarbons and danger. They were meant to be driven until the brake pad smoked. She stood up, smoothing the front of her tailored charcoal trousers, and walked over to the floor-to-ceiling glass window overlooking the showroom. She had watched the entire interaction down below. She saw the guy in the flannel and the work boots. She saw the kid. And she saw Blake, her top earner, a man whose soul was composed entirely of commission rates and hair gel, puff out his chest and throw them out. Vivian sighed, pressing her forehead against the cool glass. She should fire Blake. She should have fired him 6 months ago when he upsold an 80-year-old widow into a track-focused GT3 RS she couldn't safely steer out of her driveway. But Blake made the company $3 million a month. Morals were expensive in the luxury auto trade. She watched the man carry his kid out into the parking lot. She felt a brief, sharp pang of guilt. It wasn't fair. The guy probably just wanted to show his son a piece of engineering history. Vivian knew what it was like to be a kid in a garage staring in awe at machines that felt more alive than most people. It was how she fell in love with the business back before it became about spreadsheets. Her eyes tracked the man as he walked to the far edge of the lot. She expected him to get into a beaten-up Honda. She watched him stop next to a tarp-covered lump. Vivian frowned, squinting through the tinted glass. What was that a customer's trade-in a broken-down delivery vehicle? The man grabbed the corner of the tarp and whipped it backward. Even from 50 yards away through double-paned glass, the shape was unmistakable. The long, sweeping hood, the muscular haunches, the impossibly low roofline. Vivian's breath caught in her throat. She gripped the edge of the windowsill, her manicured nails digging into the aluminum frame. It was a 300 SL, but it was raw. Unpainted. No, Vivian whispered to the empty room. That's impossible. She knew the registry of every gullwing left on the planet. There were exactly 29 alloy-bodied gullwings ever produced by the factory. 28 were accounted for sitting in museums or private collections painted in factory-correct silver or ivory, polished to a sickening gleam. The 29th car chassis, number 5500332, had vanished in the late 70s. Rumor was it had been stripped of its paint by a fanatic racer in Europe to save weight, driven into the ground and eventually lost in a barn fire somewhere in the American Midwest. It was the holy grail of Mercedes collectors. A myth, a ghost. And the man in the flannel shirt had just casually unclipped a tarp from it in her parking lot. She watched her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird as the man reached for the door handle. Clack. Even through the soundproofing, Vivian's mind filled in the heavy metallic sound of the gullwing door rising. The man didn't hesitate. He gently lifted his son, carefully threading the boy over the wide, notoriously difficult tubular space frame sill, settling him into the passenger seat. Then the man climbed in, pulling the heavy door down shut. Vivian didn't think. She didn't grab her suit jacket. She didn't pause to check her reflection or compose her features into the impassive mask of a CEO. She bolted for the door. She hit the glass door of her office so hard it rattled on its hinges, startling her executive assistant. Vivian practically sprinted down the floating glass staircase, the sharp clack-clack-clack of her stilettos echoing off the marble like gunfire. Blake was standing near the front desk, sipping a green juice, looking thoroughly pleased with himself. As Vivian descended, he put on a wide, ingratiating smile. Mrs. Rousseau? Good afternoon. Just had to clear out some riffraff from the floor. Keeping the prestige intact, you know how it— Shut up, Blake. Vivian snapped, not breaking her stride. She moved past him with the force of a weather event, pushing through the heavy showroom doors and out into the blistering heat. The starter motor of the gullwing engaged just as she cleared the doors. It wasn't the refined, quiet hum of modern fuel injection. It was a raw, mechanical churning, metal teeth grinding against metal, the heavy intake of air, and then a deafening, throaty roar as the inline-six engine caught. It sounded like an angry god clearing its throat. The exhaust spat a plume of rich, unburnt fuel into the air. The smell of high-octane racing gas washed over Vivian, thick and intoxicating. The man was shifting into gear. "Wait!" Vivian yelled, abandoning all dignity as she ran across the hot asphalt, waving her arms. "Hey, stop!" Liam saw the woman running toward him in the rearview mirror. She was in a tailored suit, practically throwing herself in front of his exit path. He sighed, easing his foot off the heavy clutch, bringing the idling beast to a halt. The engine vibrated through his spine, shaking the naked aluminum panels around him. Vivian reached the driver's side window, which didn't roll down, merely popped out at an angle through the small vent. She looked breathless, her chest heaving, a sheen of sweat already forming on her forehead. She ignored Liam entirely for the first 3 seconds, her eyes frantically scanning the raw rivets, the hand-hammered imperfections in the alloy, the worn red leather of the bucket seats. Chassis 332. She breathed, her voice trembling. She finally met Liam's eyes, her expression a chaotic mix of awe, disbelief, and something bordering on rage. "Where the hell did you find this car?" Heat radiated from the naked aluminum hood in shimmering, distorted waves, baking the air between Liam and the frantic woman in the charcoal suit. The 3.0-liter inline-6 engine didn't purr. It idled with a coarse, uneven loping sound, the aggressive race cam, shaking the entire lightweight chassis. The vibration traveled up through the thin soles of Liam's boots into his jaw, rattling his teeth. Liam stared at her through the pop-out vent window. He didn't turn off the ignition. He didn't smile. He just kept his calloused hand clamped over the heavy ivory gearshift knob. "I asked where you found this car." Vivienne repeated, raising her voice to compete with the deafening mechanical clatter of the direct injection system. Her chest heaved, sweat beaded on her upper lip, ruining her matte foundation. She didn't care. Her eyes were wide, completely dilated, tracing the unpainted, hand-hammered rivets along the roofline. "It's not for sale," Liam said. His voice was a flat, exhausted scrape. He was too tired for this. First the slick-haired salesman, now the panicked manager. They were all the same. They saw a dollar sign. "You don't understand?" Vivian pleaded, stepping closer, ignoring the blast of hot, toxic exhaust blowing against her tailored slacks. "I know what this is. This is 332, the lost alloy car. People have spent millions trying to track this VIN. My God, the body is completely stripped. Do you have any idea what happens to untreated aluminum in the rain? You're destroying it." Liam's jaw tightened. "I know exactly what happens to it. That's why I keep it covered. And I know what it is. Step back from the door, lady. My kid is getting scared." Vivian blinked, her focus snapping from the raw metal to the interior of the cabin. Toby was clutching his plastic T-Rex, his small shoulders pressed hard against the worn red leather of the bucket seat, staring at her with wide, apprehensive eyes. Guilt pierced her sharp and sudden, but before she could soften her tone, the heavy glass doors of the dealership banged open. Blake came sprinting across the asphalt. His face was flushed, his expensive shoes slapping awkwardly against the pavement. He had seen his CEO sprint out the door, and self-preservation had finally kicked in. "Ms. Rousseau!" Blake yelled, waving his arms. He reached the driver's side of the gull wing, out of breath, entirely ignoring the masterpiece of automotive history he was standing next to. "Miss Rousseau, I am so sorry. Did he threaten you? I told this trash to leave the property 5 minutes ago. I'll call the police right now." Blake reached into his jacket pocket for his phone. Vivian turned her head. She didn't yell. She didn't scream. She just looked at Blake with a stare so cold and devoid of human warmth it could have cracked glass. "Put your phone away, Blake." Vivian said, her voice dropping to a terrifyingly quiet register. Blake froze. "But I said put it away." Vivian's eyes flicked up and down her top salesman. "You threw this man out of my showroom. He was letting his kid climb all over the SF9. Oh, he was tracking grease on the floor. Look at him, Vivian. He's a nobody. He doesn't belong." "This nobody," Vivian interrupted, her voice trembling with suppressed rage, "is sitting in a 1957 alloy-bodied Mercedes 300 SL. Do you know what that is, Blake?" "No, of course you don't. You sell lease terms and badge prestige to idiots. You don't know cars." Blake blinked, looking at the stripped, noisy machine for the first time. "It looks like a piece of junk." Vivian let out a harsh, dry laugh. That piece of junk is worth more than this entire dealership's inventory combined. It belongs in the Smithsonian, and you just insulted the man holding the keys." Liam watched the exchange with dull detachment. He hated this world. He hated the posturing, the hierarchy, the way money dictated the volume of a person's voice. He reached over, ruffling Toby's hair to soothe the boy. "We're done here," Liam muttered. Vivian snapped her attention back to him. "Wait, please. I apologize for my employee's behavior. He's fired. As of right now, he is terminated." Blake gasped. "Vivian, you can't be serious. I move $3 million a month." "You're done, Blake. Clear your desk." Vivian didn't even look at him. She kept her eyes locked on Liam's weary, grease-stained face. "Sir, please, turn the engine off. Let's go inside. My office is air-conditioned. I want to buy this car. Name your price. I will write a check right now that will change your life and your son's life forever. $8,010,000. Just tell me." Liam looked at her. He saw the desperation, the raw, naked greed of a collector staring at the Holy Grail. He looked down at his own hands, cracked and bleeding from a slip of a grinder wheel yesterday. $10 million. He could pay off his mortgage. He could put Toby in the best private school in the state. He could sleep past 4 a.m. He gripped the shifter. "I told you." Liam said, his voice dropping into a low, menacing rumble over the engine's idle. "It's not for sale." He slotted the heavy gear shift into first. He didn't rev the engine for theatrics. He just dumped the heavy clutch. The rear tires, thick modern rubber wrapping the original magnesium wheels, barked violently against the hot asphalt. The gullwing lurched forward with neck-snapping torque, leaving 2 thick black stripes on the pavement. Vivian stumbled back as the exhaust spat a cloud of acrid, unburnt hydrocarbons directly onto her slacks. She coughed, waving her hands, watching the raw silver silhouette tear out of the parking lot, merging into afternoon traffic with a brutal, screaming exhaust note that rattled the dealership's floor-to-ceiling windows. She stood in the middle of the parking lot, chest heaving, the smell of racing gas clinging to her clothes, listening to the echo of the engine fade into the distance. The dealership security room smelled of stale corn chips and cheap window cleaner. Vivian stood behind the desk chair, staring at the frozen frame on the monitor. The security guard, a nervous kid in a poorly fitting uniform, tapped the keyboard. "That's the best resolution I can get on the plate, Ms. Russo." Vivian leaned in, her eyes narrowing at the grainy, pixelated image of the gullwing's rear bumper as it exited the lot. It was an antique historical plate. B 7-409. "Print it," she ordered. 10 minutes later, she was sitting behind the wheel of her own car. It wasn't a luxury sedan or a chauffeur-driven limousine. It was a Porsche 911 GT3 touring manual transmission finished in a subtle, non-metallic slate gray. It was a driver's car. She shoved the key into the left side ignition and fired it up, ignoring the barrage of frantic text messages from Blake on her phone. She had called in a favor with a friend at the DMV. It cost her a track day pass and a bottle of Macallan 25, but she had an address. Liam Thorne. Weight check rules. Thorne is forbidden. Rewrite. Liam Hayes. O'Connor Fabrication and Welding, 440 Industrial Parkway. She navigated the Porsche out of the wealthy manicured suburbs and drove 30 minutes south into the industrial underbelly of the city. The smooth, freshly paved roads gave way to cracked, neglected asphalt, riddled with potholes that punished her stiff suspension. Retail shops dissolved into chain-link fences, corrugated steel warehouses, and lots piled high with rusted shipping containers. The air outside shifted. It no longer smelled of pine needles and artisan coffee. It smelled of sulfur diesel exhaust and wet dirt. Vivian downshifted, her rev-matching sharp and precise turning onto Industrial Parkway. It was a dead-end road lined with gritty auto body shops and heavy machinery rentals. At the very end, tucked behind a crumbling brick retaining wall, sat a squat cinderblock building with a faded, hand-painted sign, O'Connor Fabrication. The raw silver gullwing was parked out front, ticking audibly as the metal cooled in the shade of a large dying oak tree. Vivienne parked her Porsche a respectful distance away. She turned off the engine and sat in the heavy silence of the cabin for a long moment. She looked at her hands gripping the Alcantara steering wheel. Her manicure was flawless. Her rings caught the dull afternoon light. She felt entirely out of place. She felt like an invader, but she couldn't let it go. The car was a ghost. It was a piece of history that belonged in a climate-controlled vault, preserved for future generations, not sitting outside a dirty welding shop, waiting for the rain to pit its fragile aluminum skin. She opened her door and stepped out. The heat was stifling. As she approached the open bay doors of the shop, the sensory assault began. The high-pitched screaming whine of an angle grinder cutting through steel made her wince. The air inside the dim garage was thick with a hazy blue smoke that smelled sharply of ozone and melting metal. She stood at the threshold. Inside the shop was a chaotic, beautiful mess of organized labor. Stacks of raw steel tubing sat on heavy-duty racks. Argon tanks were chained to the cinder-block walls. In the center of the concrete floor, illuminated by the blinding, strobing blue light of a TIG welding arc, was Liam. He was wearing a heavy leather welding apron over his flannel, a scratched auto-darkening hood covering his face. He was hunched over a heavy steel subframe feeding a thin filler rod into a puddle of molten metal with absolute robotic precision. In the corner of the shop, safely away from the sparks and the fumes, was a small, mismatched playpen area fenced off by rolling toolboxes. Toby was sitting inside wearing oversized heavy-duty earmuffs, pushing a yellow toy dump truck through a pile of sawdust. Vivian didn't interrupt. She knew better than to break a welder's concentration. She stood near the doorway, letting her eyes adjust to the gloom, watching the man work. There was a rhythm to it, a slow, breathing cadence. The arc would flare, hiss like angry snakes, and then die, revealing a stack of perfectly laid, overlapping dimes of cooled steel. It was craftsmanship, the kind of raw manual skill that Vivian's wealthy clients paid thousands of dollars to mimic in their custom garage builds but never actually possessed. After 5 minutes, Liam finished the seam. He killed the torch, draped it over a steel hook, and pushed the welding hood up, revealing his sweat-drenched face. He reached for a dirty rag on his workbench, wiping the grime from his neck. Then he saw her. He didn't look surprised. He just looked impossibly tired. He tossed the rag onto the bench. "You're persistent," Liam said. His voice echoed slightly in the cavernous room. Vivian stepped inside her high heels, clicking sharply against the concrete, a stark contrast to the heavy industrial space. "I don't like leaving things unfinished, and I don't like the way you were treated in my establishment." "Your establishment?" Liam repeated, letting out a dry, humorless exhale. "Right. The place where you hire guys to insult people's kids." "I fired him," Vivian said evenly. "He was out the door before you even merged onto the highway." Liam walked over to a mini fridge in the corner, pulling out a generic brand bottled water. He cracked the plastic seal. "Good for you. Corporate restructuring. Doesn't change anything, lady. You drove all the way down here to a zip code you probably wouldn't even fly over just to write a check. The answer is still no. My name is Vivian," she said, stepping further into the shop, letting her eyes drift past him to the tools. Good tools. Snap-on Mac, heavily used but meticulously organized. "And I didn't come here to write a check. Well, I did, but I realize now that's the wrong approach." Liam took a long drink of water. "There is no right approach. That car is mine. Dursoy, it's a 1957 300 SL alloy." Vivian said, her voice dropping the corporate polish replaced by a raw, genuine intensity. "Chassis number 5500332, ordered by a Swiss privateer racer, shipped to Milan, modified for the Mille Miglia, and then vanished. Poof. Gone in 1978. The registry has listed it as destroyed for 40 years. Liam leaned against his heavy steel workbench, crossing his arms over his chest. He looked at her. Really looked at her for the first time. He noticed the crease between her eyebrows, the genuine reverence in her tone. "How do you know the chassis number?" Liam asked quietly. "Because I know cars." Vivian said, I don't just sell them, I study them, I breathe them. That car, it's a masterpiece. But the aluminum is bare. It's totally unprotected. The magnesium wheels look structurally sound, but if they hit a deep pothole, they'll shatter like glass. The mechanical fuel injection pump is notoriously finicky, and if it runs too rich, it washes the cylinder walls and destroys the engine. Liam's eyebrows rose a fraction of an inch. He hadn't expected that. He expected a trust fund CEO who only knew the price tags. He didn't expect someone who understood the catastrophic failure points of a Bosch mechanical injection system. It runs slightly rich on startup. Liam admitted, a grudging respect slipping into his tone. The warm-up regulator is sticking. I'm rebuilding it this weekend. Vivian closed the distance between them, stopping a few feet away. She didn't look repulsed by the dirt, the smell of sweat, or the grime. She looked entirely focused. "Who are you, Liam?" she asked softly. "How does a fabricator in a shop like this end up with a $50 million ghost?" Liam stared at her. The silence in the shop stretched out, broken only by the faint rhythmic scraping of Toby's plastic dump truck in the corner and the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. He weighed his options. He could tell her to get out. He could threaten to call the cops. But she wasn't leaving. She had the scent of blood in her nose. Liam sighed, rubbing a calloused hand over his face. He felt the grit against his skin, the permanent residue of his life. "My father," Liam said finally. He didn't look at her. He looked past her out the open bay doors toward the silver silhouette resting under the oak tree. His name was Thomas Hayes. He was a mechanic, a savant really, but he was a terrible businessman and a worse gambler. Vivian stayed perfectly still, terrified that any sudden movement would make him shut down. He worked on European imports back in the 80s. Liam continued, his voice monotone, detached. "Rich guys from the city would bring their broken toys down here because my old man could fix things that the dealerships couldn't even diagnose. One of those rich guys was a hedge fund manager. He brought that Gullwing in. It had been painted red by then, thick, ugly lacquer to hide the racing dents. The engine was seized. The guy wanted it fixed." Liam walked over to his toolbox, picking up a heavy steel wrench, turning it over and over in his hands, feeling the cold weight of it. "My dad stripped the engine down, found out what he was working on. He tried to tell the owner what he had, but the guy didn't care. He just wanted a flashy red car to drive to the country club. Before my dad could finish the rebuild, the owner got indicted. Massive securities fraud. Feds seized all his assets. But the car was in pieces in your father's shop." Vivian finished, her breath catching. "It wasn't on the official asset ledger." "Right," Liam said. "It sat in the corner of this exact building under a tarp for 20 years. My dad kept his mouth shut. When the statute of limitations passed and the owner died in federal prison, my dad started putting it back together. Slowly, secretly. He stripped that awful red paint off by hand, inch by inch, using chemical stripper and brass wool so he wouldn't damage the aluminum underneath." Liam tossed the wrench back onto the bench with a loud metallic clank. He spent the last 10 years of his life putting it together. He died 3 years ago. Heart attack right there. Liam pointed to a grease-stained patch of concrete near the lift. "He left me this shop. He left me a mountain of medical debt. And he left me that car." Vivian looked at him, her heart aching in a way she hadn't felt in a decade. She looked at the fraying cuffs of his flannel shirt. She looked at the exhaustion etched deeply into the corners of his eyes. "Liam," she said gently, "you're sitting on a winning lottery ticket. Why are you working yourself to death in here if you sell it? You're free. You never have to weld another frame. Toby never has to want for anything." Liam's jaw locked. The muscles feathered in his cheek. He turned his head, looking at his son in the corner. Toby had taken his earmuffs off and was peacefully asleep, his head resting against a soft pile of clean shop rags. "Because it's not a lottery ticket," Liam said, his voice thick with an emotion he fought violently to suppress. "It's my dad. It's the thousands of hours we spent in this freezing garage, busting our knuckles, fighting over torque specs, listening to the radio. It's the only thing he ever accomplished that was perfect. He didn't build a good business. He didn't build a good marriage. But he saved that car." He took a step toward Vivian. The physical intimidation wasn't intentional. He was just a large, solidly built man used to moving heavy things. "You think money fixes everything?" Liam said softly, not angrily, but with a profound, sad certainty. "You think I sell that car and my life gets better. But if I sell it, I'm selling the only piece of my father that Toby will ever get to know. I'm trading my family's history for cash. I won't do it. I'd rather eat dirt." Vivian felt a lump form in her throat. She swallowed hard. She thought about her own life. The sterile multi-million-dollar penthouse. The empty relationships. The cars she bought purely to flip for a 10% margin. She realized with a sickening drop in her stomach that she was exactly what he thought she was. She was Blake, just in a better suit and with a bigger bank account. "You're right," Vivian whispered. Liam frowned, caught off guard. "What?" "You're right," she repeated, her voice steadying. "I've spent the last 10 years turning art into currency. I look at a car like that, and my brain instantly calculates the auction premium at R.M. Sotheby's. I'm sorry." She broke eye contact, looking out toward the car. Can I just see the engine bay? I won't ask to buy it again. I swear. I just want to look at the dry sump setup. I've only ever seen diagrams." Liam studied her face. He looked for the hustle, the angle, the hidden motive. But all he saw was the same desperate, quiet reverence his father used to have when he opened a service manual. Slowly, the tension drained from Liam's shoulders. He gave a single short nod. "It's hot," Liam warned, walking past her toward the daylight. "Don't touch the exhaust headers." Vivian followed him out into the muggy afternoon air. Standing next to the raw, unpainted machine, she felt a strange sense of peace. Liam reached inside the cabin and pulled the hood release. He walked around to the front, lifting the long, sweeping aluminum hood, securing it with the prop rod. The engine bay was a visceral shock. It wasn't detailed for a concourse lawn. It was working machinery. The massive intake manifold dominated the space stained with oil and heat. The linkages were greased, the heavy braided fuel lines were routed with militaristic precision. It smelled intensely of hot oil, scorched metal, and old money. Vivian leaned in, careful not to let her silk blouse touch the greasy fenders. She traced the complex mechanical linkages of the fuel injection pump with her eyes. "The throttle linkage," Vivian murmured, pointing to a beautifully machined piece of brass connecting the pedal assembly to the throttle body. "That's not factory." Liam smiled. It was a small, genuine smile that transformed his rough face, making him look years younger. "Good eye. The original stamped steel one snapped in '89. Dad machined that one from a solid billet of naval brass. Smoother pedal feel." "It's brilliant," she admitted, stepping back. She looked at Liam. The hostility was gone, replaced by a fragile, tentative bridge built on mutual respect for a machine. It burns oil on deceleration," Liam said, leaning against the front fender. "Valve stem seals are probably shot. Need to pull the head this winter." "You do it yourself." "Who else is going to do it?" Liam chuckled darkly. "Dealership mechanics plug in a laptop. This car requires a micrometer and a prayer." Vivian looked at him, an idea sparking in her mind. Not a corporate transaction. Something else entirely. A strange, terrifying departure from her spreadsheets and profit margins. "I have a machine shop," Vivian said, slowly testing the waters. "At the dealership, in the back, far away from the showroom. We have 5-axis CNC machines, an ultrasonic parts cleaner, and an engine dynamometer that we use for the modern race prep. It sits empty on weekends." Liam crossed his arms. And Vivian continued, meeting his gaze. "If you need to pull the head, you're going to need a place to resurface the deck. Bring it there. I'll give you the keys to the shop. No charge, no strings. Just let me watch you rebuild it." Liam stared at her, utterly bewildered. "Why?" Vivian looked down at her immaculate, expensive shoes, then up at the raw, beautiful, violently imperfect car. "Because," she said softly, "I think I forgot what it feels like to actually build something instead of just buying it." The service entrance of Continental Exotics felt like a portal to another dimension. Liam idled his beat-up Ford F-150 at the security gate. It was 9 p.m. on a Saturday. The air was thick with humidity, the dashboard clock glowing a faint sickly green. Beside him on the bench seat, Toby was dead to the world, his cheek mashed against a crumpled fleece jacket, lightly snoring. In the bed of the truck, wrapped in an oil-soaked moving blanket and strapped down with heavy ratchets, lay the cylinder head of the M198 engine. It was a massive piece of cast aluminum, a complex labyrinth of valves and ports that held the soul of the gull wing. The heavy iron gate hummed and slid open. Liam drove around to the back. The service bays were dark, save for one row of overhead LED lights illuminating the machine shop in the far corner. It didn't look like a garage. It looked like an operating room. The floors were coated in spotless white epoxy. The toolboxes were uniform gray steel built into the walls. Vivian was standing by the ultrasonic parts cleaner. Liam parked and cut the engine. He unbuckled Toby, lifting the sleeping boy with practiced ease, letting Toby's head rest on his shoulder. He carried him inside. Vivian turned as the glass door slid open. Liam stopped. He was so used to seeing her armored in charcoal wool and silk that he barely recognized her. She wore faded denim jeans, grease-smudged Converse sneakers, and a plain black t-shirt. Her hair was tied back in a messy, utilitarian knot. She looked younger. She looked human. "Over here." Vivian whispered, seeing Toby asleep. She pointed to a glass-walled manager's office in the corner. Inside, she had set up a makeshift bed on a leather sofa, complete with a blanket, and a tablet playing a muted cartoon. Liam laid Toby down, pulling the blanket over the boy's shoulders. He stepped out gently, clicking the door shut. "Thank you," Liam said. His voice was guarded. He was still waiting for the catch, the hidden invoice. "Archie, coffee's in the thermos," Vivian said, gesturing to a stainless steel carafe on a workbench. "Black, motor oil consistency, just how you mechanics supposedly like it." Liam allowed a short, tired exhale that might have been a laugh. He walked back out to the truck, lowered the tailgate, and hoisted the heavy aluminum cylinder head onto his shoulder. He carried it inside and set it down on a heavy rubber mat atop the main workbench. The metal hit the rubber with a dull, heavy thud. Vivian approached. She didn't hover awkwardly. She picked up a high-lumen inspection flashlight and clicked it on, running the harsh white beam over the combustion chambers. "Valve guides on cylinders 3 and 5 are totally worn," she muttered, tracing a thin line of carbon buildup with her bare finger. She looked up at Liam, her eyes bright with genuine fascination. "You weren't kidding. It was pulling oil straight past the seals." "I told you," Liam said, grabbing a metric wrench from his back pocket. "Now comes the fun part. We have to strip it." For the next 3 hours, the sterile shop was filled with the rhythmic sounds of manual labor, the sharp crack of breaking loose stubborn bolts, the hiss of compressed air, the metallic ping of valve springs being compressed and released. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. There is a universal language in mechanics, a shared understanding of torque and tolerance. Liam worked with a brutal, efficient grace. His hands, scarred and calloused, moved over the delicate aluminum with surprising tenderness. Vivian shadowed him. She didn't just watch. She handed him tools before he asked for them. She cleaned the carbon-caked valves with a brass wire brush, the smell of acrid solvent and ancient burnt oil filling the pristine air. At midnight, Liam stood in front of the 5-axis CNC milling machine. Vivian had programmed it. The cylinder head was locked in the vise. "We need to shave 0.03 of an inch to make the deck perfectly flat," Vivian said, her fingers flying over the control panel. "No more. We can't increase the compression ratio on that old bottom end, or we'll blow the piston rings." 0.03, Liam confirmed. Vivian hit the green start button. The machine whined a high-pitched electronic hum, and the cutting head began its slow, methodical pass over the aluminum. The scent of synthetic cutting fluid, sweet and slightly metallic, bloomed in the air. Liam leaned against a workbench, crossing his arms, watching the machine work. "You know how to run G-code?" "My father owned a factory." Vivian said quietly, not looking away from the spinning cutter. Before he sold it and became a holding company, I practically grew up on a shop floor, sweeping metal shavings. I loved it. I loved the noise. Liam looked at her profile. The harsh overhead lights cast deep shadows under her eyes. She looked as exhausted as he felt, but there was a peace in her posture that hadn't been there at the dealership. "What happened?" Liam asked. Vivian sighed. The machine continued its relentless screaming cut. "Money happened. The factory became a brand. The brand got acquired. Suddenly I wasn't allowed on the floor anymore because of liability. I was sent to business school. I learned how to read P&L statements instead of calipers. I built an empire buying and selling things I used to build." She turned to look at him, her eyes catching the light. "I haven't had grease under my fingernails in 15 years, Liam. Until tonight." Liam looked down at his own hands. "It doesn't wash off. Not completely. You start doing this every day, it gets into the lines of your skin. It marks you." "I think," Vivian said softly, "I wouldn't mind being marked." The machine chimed. The cut was finished. The deck of the cylinder head gleamed with a perfect mirror-flat finish. Liam ran his thumb over the edge. It was flawless. "Come on," Liam said, a strange, unfamiliar warmth expanding in his chest. "Let's get this thing back together. Toby wakes up at 6 no matter what." 2 weeks later. The heat wave had broken, replaced by a relentless gray drizzle that turned the dirt lot outside Liam's shop into a muddy soup. Inside the shop was warm. The engine block was fully assembled, sitting proudly in the chassis of the Gullwing. Liam was leaning over the fender, carefully torquing the fuel injector lines. He was close. 2 more hours and he could turn the key. The sound of tires crunching over gravel made him pause. He wiped his hands on a rag and walked toward the open bay doors. A sleek black Mercedes S-Class was parked illegally across his driveway, blocking his truck. The rain beaded perfectly on its ceramic-coated paint. 2 men stepped out. The first was Blake. The former salesman was wearing a trench coat, holding an umbrella, and sporting a smug, venomous grin. The second man was older, built like a fire hydrant, in a bespoke charcoal suit. He didn't carry an umbrella. He just let the rain hit him. Liam felt the hair on the back of his neck stand up. A cold, heavy dread settled in his stomach. "Liam Hayes?" the older man asked. His voice was smooth-cultured and entirely devoid of empathy. "Shop's closed," Liam said, stepping out into the rain, his boots sinking into the mud. He blocked the entrance to the garage with his body. "I'm not here for a welding job," the man said, pulling a thick manila envelope from his inner jacket pocket. "My name is Cole. I represent a private syndicate of automotive antiquities collectors. My associate here," he gestured vaguely toward Blake, "informed me that you are currently in possession of chassis number 5500332. Liam didn't look at Blake. Looking at Blake would trigger a violent reaction, and Liam couldn't afford to be arrested. "I don't know what you're talking about," Liam lied. Cole smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "Mr. Hayes, please. I have a court order of replevin right here. That vehicle was seized by the federal government in 1984 as part of an asset forfeiture. Your father, a mechanic, unlawfully retained it. That makes it stolen property." The world tilted slightly on its axis. Liam's breathing grew shallow. He tasted copper. "My dad didn't steal anything," Liam growled, stepping forward, his fists clenching at his sides. "The owner abandoned it. My dad rebuilt it from dust. The law doesn't care about sweat equity." "Mr. Hayes," Cole said smoothly, tapping the envelope against his palm. "The car belongs to the estate which my syndicate purchased the rights to last week when we were tipped off to its existence. Now I have 2 options for you. Option A, you hand over the keys, we load the car onto a flatbed, and I write you a nuisance check for $20,000 to cover storage fees." Cole stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Option B, I call the police. You are arrested for possession of stolen property valued at over $20 million. That is a Class A felony. You go to prison. And your son—" Cole paused, glancing past Liam into the shop. "Toby, is it? He goes into the state foster care system. Liam's vision narrowed to a pinprick. The blood roared in his ears, drowning out the sound of the rain. The threat wasn't the car. The threat was Toby. They knew exactly where to slip the knife. He lunged. He grabbed Cole by the lapels of his $1,000 suit, slamming the older man backward into the side of the S-Class. The metal dented with a loud thump. Blake shrieked and dropped his umbrella, scurrying backward into the mud. "You don't talk about my son!" Liam roared, his forearm pressing against Cole's throat. "You come near him, I will kill you. I will bury you under this concrete." Cole gasped for air, his face turning red, but a sick, triumphant smile played on his lips. "Do it!" Cole wheezed. "Assault! That makes it even easier." Liam froze. The reality of the trap closed around him. If he hit him, he lost Toby. If he let him go, he lost his father's legacy. He was a bug trapped in a jar, suffocating under the weight of people who owned the world. He slowly released Cole, stepping back, his hands shaking with unspent adrenaline. "Smart boy," Cole said, straightening his tie, gasping slightly. He tossed the envelope into the mud at Liam's feet. "I've dispatched a flatbed. It will be here in 20 minutes. If you try to move the car, the police will intercept you." Liam stood in the rain, staring at the envelope. He had never felt so utterly, completely powerless. He pulled his phone from his pocket. His thumb hovered over the screen. He didn't have a lawyer. He didn't have money. He only knew one person who spoke this language. He hit a contact. It rang twice. "Liam!" Vivian's voice was sharp, professional. "They're taking it," Liam said. His voice cracked. He hated himself for the weakness in it. "A guy named Cole. Blake brought him. They have some kind of court order. They said my dad stole it. They threatened to put Toby in foster care, Vivian. I don't know what to do." Silence on the other end. For 3 seconds, there was nothing but static. When Vivian spoke, the professional polish was gone. What replaced it was a cold, terrifying, absolute power. "Don't let them touch the car. Put Cole on the phone." Liam handed the phone to Cole. "For you." Cole smirked, taking the phone, holding it to his ear. "Hello? Whoever this is, you're interfering with illegal asset repossession." Cole stopped. The blood drained from his face. Liam watched as the arrogant, untouchable man went completely rigid. Cole's mouth opened, but no words came out. He listened to whatever Vivian was saying for 60 agonizing seconds. "Ms. Rousseau," Cole stammered, "we didn't know you had a stake." More silence as Cole listened. He started to sweat despite the cold rain. "Yes, ma'am," Cole whispered finally. "Understood. The claim is withdrawn." Cole hung up. He didn't hand the phone back to Liam. He dropped it onto the hood of Liam's F-150 as if it were radioactive. He turned to Blake, his face contorted in absolute fury. "You idiot!" Cole hissed at Blake. "You didn't tell me Vivienne Rousseau was involved with this chassis." So what?" Blake stuttered, backing away. "She just sells cars. She's on the board of directors for the International Registry, you imbecile. She just threatened to blacklist my entire syndicate from every major auction house in the world. She threatened to trigger an IRS audit on my holding company by noon." Cole opened the door of the S-Class. "Get in the car, Blake. You're dead in this industry. Dead." The S-Class threw a spray of mud as it tore out of the driveway, disappearing into the gray rain. Liam stood alone in the quiet. He picked up his phone. The call had ended. He walked back into the shop, the smell of oil and metal wrapping around him like a familiar blanket. He sat down on a milk crate next to the gullwing, burying his face in his dirty hands, and finally let out a long, ragged breath. Vivian arrived 40 minutes later. She didn't drive the Porsche. She drove a nondescript SUV, pulling right into the shop to avoid the rain. She stepped out, shaking her umbrella. She looked at Liam, who was sitting silently next to the car, a wrench loose in his grip. "Are you okay?" she asked, gently approaching him. "How did you do it?" Liam asked, not looking up. "How did you make them run away like that? Vivian leaned against the heavy steel workbench. The classic car world is small, Liam. It relies on provenance, papers, verifiable history. Cole's syndicate buys cars with murky histories and pays off registry officials to legitimize them. I know this because they tried to recruit me a year ago. I told Cole if he touched your car, I would leak his entire operation to the federal authorities and ruin his entire portfolio. Liam finally looked up. You blackmailed him. I protected an asset, Vivian corrected softly. And the people attached to it. Liam stared at her. He saw the fierce, uncompromising loyalty in her eyes. It was a loyalty he hadn't experienced since his father died. It terrified him, and it grounded him all at once. I finished torquing the fuel lines, Liam said quietly, shifting the subject. The emotional weight was too heavy. He needed the mechanical. He stood up, wiping his hands. It has oil. It has fuel. Vivian's eyes widened. The corporate shark vanished, replaced instantly by the gearhead. Are you going to start it? Liam walked to the driver's side. He lifted the gullwing door. It rose with that heavy, satisfying clack. We are, Liam said. He looked at her. Get in. Vivian hesitated, then carefully climbed over the wide tubular sill, settling into the worn red leather passenger seat. Liam slid into the driver's side. The cabin was intimate, smelling of old leather gasoline and the damp rain outside. Liam pulled the heavy brass choke knob. He turned the key one click to the right. The fuel pump whined a high electrical buzzing from the rear of the car. He looked at Vivian. She gave a small, eager nod. Liam pushed the starter button. The starter motor ground heavily for 2 seconds. Then the engine caught. It wasn't a roar. It was a violent percussive explosion of sound. The unpainted exhaust headers rang like church bells. The mechanical injection system clattered wildly for a moment before Liam feathered the throttle, settling the idle into a deep, aggressive, loping rhythm. The entire aluminum chassis vibrated, shaking their teeth, transferring the immense raw energy of the engine directly into their bones. Liam checked the rearview mirror. No blue smoke. The rebuilt cylinder head was holding perfect compression. He looked over at Vivian. She had both hands pressed against the dashboard, feeling the vibration. She was smiling. It wasn't a polite, rehearsed smile. It was a massive, uncontrollable grin showing all her teeth, her eyes bright with unshed tears of pure adrenaline. It's alive! Vivian shouted over the deafening noise. Liam didn't smile, but the heavy, suffocating knot in his chest finally unspooled. He reached down and slotted the heavy gear shift into first. He didn't wait for the rain to stop. Liam dumped the clutch. The rear tires spun wildly on the wet concrete of the shop floor before biting into the gravel outside. The gullwing shot out of the garage like a silver bullet tearing into the gray afternoon. They drove through the industrial parkway. Liam didn't take it easy. He kept the revs high, letting the straight-cut gears whine, letting the engine scream. The car felt incredibly light dancing on the edge of traction over the wet asphalt. It demanded absolute attention, absolute respect. He double-clutched downshifting into a sweeping curve. The mechanical linkage he and his father had built worked flawlessly. The throttle response was telepathic. After 20 minutes of hard driving, Liam pulled off onto a high concrete overpass overlooking the city. The rain had faded to a fine mist. Below them, the sprawling grid of the city glowed in the twilight, a sea of amber streetlights and brake lights. He cut the engine. The sudden silence in the cabin was heavy, broken only by the loud tick-tick-tick of the metal exhaust cooling in the damp air. Liam rested his forearms on the steering wheel, staring out at the city. You drive it, Vivian said softly. Like it's meant to be driven. It's not a museum piece, Liam said, his voice rough. It's a machine. My dad knew that. You know that. He turned to look at her. The ambient light from the city cast a soft glow on her face. I can't pay you for what you did today, Liam said. I can't pay you for the machine shop, and I can't pay you for getting Cole off my back. Vivian shook her head. I don't want your money, Liam. I never wanted it. I just wanted to remember what this felt like, to save something real. Liam reached into his pocket. He pulled out a small, heavy piece of machined brass. It was the original broken throttle linkage piece that his father had replaced years ago. He held it out to her. "I don't have much to give," Liam said, holding her gaze. "But this is part of the car, part of the history. Keep it on your desk, so you don't forget what real metal feels like." Vivian slowly reached out, taking the heavy brass piece. Her fingers brushed against his rough, calloused palm. The metal was cold, but the contact was warm. She closed her fist around it. "I won't forget," she promised quietly. They sat there as the ghost car cooled high above a city of millions. They were from different universes, a billionaire chained to an empire and a welder anchored by grease and love. They didn't fall into each other's arms. They didn't sign a contract. They just sat in the quiet, listening to the metal breathe, two entirely imperfect people who had finally found common ground on the asphalt. If Liam and Vivian's journey through grit gasoline and corporate sabotage struck a chord with "You don't let the story end here," hit that like button to support raw, grounded storytelling and share this video with fellow gearheads, single parents, or anyone who knows the true value of hard work over a price tag. Your support helps us create more deeply human, thrilling narratives. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Drop a comment below. What would you have done in Liam's shoes? Keep driving and see you next time.